My hand was shaking, not a gentle tremor, but a violent, uncontrollable quake, as if my nervous system was trying to physically expel a poison. My eyes were fixed on the screen, but the numbers had stopped making sense. There was only the color, a deep, brutal, screaming red that seemed to burn to the monitor and sear itself onto my retinas. This wasn't just a loss. This was an execution. The moment where every bad decision, every broken rule, every surge of ego and fear had convened to deliver a final, fatal blow. My account was gone. My confidence was a crater. And in the hollow silence of my room, I felt something inside me collapse. That was the day my trading account died. It was also the day my journey to becoming a millionaire actually began. But to understand the victory, you have to understand the disease that led to that rock bottom, because it's a disease that infects almost everyone who enters this arena. The infection didn't start with pain. It started with pleasure. The most intoxicating pleasure a new trader can experience. The easy win. I remember it vividly. It was a hot tech stock, one that a friend had mentioned offhandedly. I pulled up a chart, pretending I knew what I was looking at. I saw a few big green candles, felt a jolt of what I now know was pure FOMO, and I jumped in. I bought a position far too large for my tiny account, with no clearly defined stop loss, no profit target, and no real thesis other than, it looks like it's going up. It was gambling, pure and simple. For the next 3 days, I was glued to my phone. Every hour, I would refresh my brokerage app, my heart pounding. And every time, the number was bigger. It felt like a video game cheat code. The market wasn't rewarding a well-thought-out process. It was rewarding a reckless impulse. When I finally sold, the profit that hit my account was surreal. It was more than 2 months of my grueling 9 to 5 salary, earned in less than a week, seemingly from thin air. That moment was the single most destructive event in my early trading career. It didn't just give me money. It gave me a story. A deeply compelling, highly addictive, and lethally false story. The story wasn't, "You got incredibly lucky." The story my ego chose to write was, "You have the gift. You are natural. You see the market in a way others don't." This is the deadliest psychological poison in trading. Unearned confidence. It allows you to build a skyscraper of self-worth on a foundation of sand. It replaces the essential foundational work of learning risk management and discipline with the intoxicating belief in your own innate genius. Once you believe that story, your goal is no longer to trade well. It's to constantly prove that the story is true. I started to see my day job as a temporary inconvenience, a place for the unenlightened masses. I would sit in meetings, mentally scoffing at my colleagues, thinking, "You guys have no idea what I'm capable of." I was no longer trading the market. I was defending my newfound identity as a prodigy, and the market is a master at humbling prodigies. It's a patient predator. It will let you have a few small wins, feeding your ego, encouraging you to take more risk, letting you build your prison of pride higher and higher. And then it removes the foundation, and the entire structure comes crashing down. That first win sent me on a desperate quest. I wasn't trying to learn a durable skill anymore. I was chasing that same original high. I became a full-time strategy hopper, a digital pilgrim on a doomed search for the Holy Grail. This is the second stage of the disease, and it's where most aspiring traders live and die. You convince yourself that the fault isn't in your discipline or your psychology, but in the system you're using. You believe you are just one magic indicator away from consistency. My journey was a cliche because it's a path worn smooth by millions before me. I started with RSI divergence, convinced it was the secret language of the charts. When that failed, it wasn't my fault. RSI was clearly a lagging indicator. So I moved on to Fibonacci, believing the universe's golden ratio governed the markets. When that failed, it was because I needed to pair it with moving averages. When that failed, I dive into the murky depths of YouTube, watching videos of charismatic gurus in rented Lamborghinis explaining their foolproof systems. I bought a $500 course that promised to teach me the secrets of institutional order flow. For a week, I felt that rush of hope again. This was it. But the results were the same. Each failure was followed by a frantic search for a new savior, a new system. It was an endless cycle of hope and despair. This frantic search is never about finding a better strategy. It is a deeply rooted psychological need to avoid accountability. As long as you can blame the system, you never have to face the terrifying truth that the problem might be you. It's far easier to say Wyckoff theory is too subjective than it is to admit, I was too greedy to take profit, or I was too scared to honor my stop loss. I was willingly outsourcing my decisions, and therefore my growth. To anyone who sounded confident, my trading account wasn't dying in a single, spectacular explosion. It was dying a slow, agonizing death by 1,000 paper cuts, each cut bandaged with the false hope that the next system would finally be the one. The day of the execution was a Tuesday. I remember the air felt heavy, stagnant, as if the world was holding its breath. A setup was forming on a volatile tech stock, and in my mind, it wasn't just a setup, it was a masterpiece. It was a perfect confluence, a symphony of all the fragmented systems I collected. The volume profile showed a clear lack of supply. The structure looked like a textbook accumulation pattern. My favorite moving averages were about to form a golden cross. It was as if every guru I had ever listened to was speaking to me at once, telling me, this is it. This is a trade that pays for all the losses. This is a trade that proves you were right all along. My written trading plan, a document I had barely glanced at in weeks, had a very clear rule. Risk no more than 1% of the account on any single trade. A small, rational voice in the back of my skull whispered this rule to me. It was a faint, timid voice, weakened from weeks of being ignored. Follow the plan. Standard size. Protect your capital. But another voice answered it, and this one was not a whisper. It was a roaring, deafening tidal wave of pure emotion. It was a voice of my ego, raw from a string of losses and desperate for validation. It was a voice of my greed, fantasizing about the massive green candle that would erase all my mistakes. It screamed, don't you dare be a coward now. Fortune favors the bold. This is a once-in-a-month opportunity. You have to size up. This is how legends are made. In that moment, I made a conscious decision. I chose the roar. I chose what I mistook for bravery. I didn't just take my standard 1% risk. I loaded up a position that was 10% of my account. Then, feeling a surge of defiant, almost manic energy, I clicked the buy button again, leveraging my account to the hilt. My total risk was closer to 25% of my capital on a single speculative bet. I had taken my meticulously crafted rulebook and used it as kindling for a bonfire hubris. The moment my order was filled, the market turned on me. It wasn't a slow drift or a gentle pullback. It was an immediate, violent rejection. The price didn't just tick down, it plunged, as if my buy order itself had triggered an avalanche of selling. My first reaction was pure denial, the classic amateur response. This is a stop hunt, I told myself, my heart beginning a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. They're just clearing out the weak hands before the real move begins. But the price kept falling. The small red number on my screen began to expand with horrifying speed, each new digit a fresh stab of panic. My rational brain, the part that understood risk and probabilities, was being systematically disconnected. My primal fight or flight response had seized control. My breathing became shallow and ragged. My focus narrowed until the only thing that existed in the universe was that hemorrhaging P&L figure. This position was no longer a trade. It was a referendum on my entire identity. Closing for a loss would be an admission of everything I feared I was: a fool, an undisciplined gambler, a failure. Holding on, however, kept a sliver of hope alive, the hope that I could still be proven right, that I could still be the hero of my own story. So I held. I gripped my mouse, my knuckles white, and I watched as the price sliced through every conceivable level of support. I was paralyzed. Instead of taking action, instead of cutting the loss to save what was left of my account, I did something even worse. I began to hope. I prayed. I bargained with a market that has no ears and no mercy. Then came the final flashing signal, a pop-up notification from my broker. The color is sterile, corporate red. It was a margin call. The system's automated risk protocols were taking over because I had so spectacularly failed to implement my own. It was over, with a series of emotionless mechanical executions. The platform liquidated my entire position at the very bottom tick, locking in a loss so catastrophic it didn't just wipe my account out. It went negative. I stared at the balance, a number in brackets that represented a debt, and the room began to spin. That's when the shaking started. It began in my hand and spread through my entire body, a physical manifestation of a complete psychological collapse. I had been utterly and completely annihilated, not by the market, but by myself. I pushed my chair back from the desk, the legs screeching against the floor, stood up on trembling legs, and spoke the two words that were the only truth I left. I quit. For 3 days, I lived in a gray, silent fog. The act of quitting had brought a momentary, blessed relief, like a soldier finally laying down his arms on a lost battlefield. But that peace was a mirage. It was soon replaced by a shame so heavy and so suffocating it felt physical. It was the shame of the secret I could tell no one. I hadn't just lost money. I had revealed myself to be a fool. I had failed not because of bad luck, but because of a fundamental flaw in my character. The weight of that truth was crushing. On the 4th day, I walked back to my desk, drawn by some morbid curiosity. I sat in the same chair where my financial execution had taken place, but I didn't turn on the monitors. The thought of looking at a chart made me feel physically ill. Instead, I pulled out a blank notebook and a simple pen. For an hour, I just stared at the empty page, a perfect reflection of my trading account and my state of mind. Then I wrote down a question. It wasn't what was wrong with my strategy, or how can I find a better system? I knew instinctively that those are the wrong questions, the questions of a victim. I wrote down the only question that mattered, the question that would become the foundation of my entire recovery. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Who am I?" That single question changed the trajectory of my life. It forced me to stop analyzing the external world of charts and indicators and start the terrifying, essential work of analyzing my internal world. It was the beginning of a brutal but necessary autopsy of my trading persona. The words poured out of me, a confession to myself. I was being arrogant, believing I could predict the unpredictable. I was being greedy, chasing a life-altering win instead of methodically building wealth. I was being hopelessly undisciplined, treating my own rules as loose suggestions to be discarded at the first sign of emotional pressure. I was being cowardly, too afraid to accept the small, definite pain of stop loss, and in doing so, I chose the infinite, catastrophic pain of a total wipeout. I was being an addict, chasing the dopamine hit of a win with no regard for the process. I filled page after page, not with market analysis, but with an honest inventory of my psychological flaws. It was then that the most profound insight hit me like a physical blow. The market is not your opponent. It is your mirror. It doesn't create your greed, your fear, or your ego. It simply reflects them back at you with perfect, unwavering clarity and then hands you the bill. I quit moment wasn't an ending. It was a required death. The undisciplined, ego-driven gambler had to die so that a real trader could be born. My notebook became my new mentor. I wasn't rebuilding a trading account. I was rebuilding an identity. My first task was to forge a new constitution, a set of unbreakable laws designed not to beat the market, but to protect me from myself. The first and most important pillar of this new identity became my daily mantra. I wrote it on a sticky note and put it on my monitor. My job is not to be right. My job is to be disciplined. My self-worth is determined by my adherence to my process, not by the random outcome of any single trade. This reframing was revolutionary. It meant I could end a day with a net loss, but still feel like a complete success if I had followed every one of my rules to the letter. A perfect day was no longer about ending in the green. It was about flawless execution. Conversely, I could snag a lucky, impulsive winning trade, and I would mark that day as a failure because I had betrayed my process and reinforced bad habits. For the first time, I had taken control of the scoreboard. I was no longer playing the market's game of random reinforcement. I was playing my own game of disciplined action. My confidence was no longer tied to my P&L, a number that fluctuated wildly, but to my own actions the only thing I could truly control. The second pillar was about transforming my relationship with failure. My terror of being wrong was a psychological cancer that led me to hold losing trades until they became catastrophic. I had to learn how to lose properly. So I wrote my next core principle, a quickly cut, well-managed loss is not a failure. It is a victory for discipline. I began to see taking a stop loss not as an admission of defeat, but as a badge of professionalism. It was proof that I respected uncertainty. It was the act of a warrior who knows which battles to fight and which to walk away from in order to fight another day. Amateurs hold losing trades, praying they will come back, because their ego is tied to being right. Professionals cut losing trades instantly because their ego is tied to being disciplined and surviving. I started practicing being professional, even if it was just in my mind at first. I would rather be a live coward who runs from a bad trade than a dead hero who went down with the ship. The third and most transformative pillar of my reconstruction was the creation of an emotional trade journal. This went far beyond logging entries, exits, and profit or loss. This was a journal of my soul. After every trading day, I would answer a series of questions. What was I feeling when I entered the trade? FOMO, boredom, confidence, fear? What was the story I was telling myself? That this was a one, or that it was just one of 1,000 trades? When my stop loss was hit, what was my immediate gut-level emotional reaction? Anger, relief, frustration? When I had a winning trade, what was the impulse? To immediately look for another trade, to double my size, to feel arrogant. For weeks, I did nothing but fill this journal. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, not on price charts, but on the charts of my own mind. I discovered that after 2 consecutive winning trades, my arrogance spiked, and I was highly likely to break my rules on the third trade. I learned that on slow, boring market days, I felt an almost irresistible urge to manufacture a trade out of thin air, just to feel some action. I realized that seeing another trader post a huge win on social media was a massive trigger for my FOMO, often leading me to take unplanned, low-probability setups. My journal became a detailed map of my own psychological minefield. I was no longer a victim of my emotions. I was becoming a student of them. I could now anticipate them. The moment I felt that familiar surge of overconfidence, a new, rational alarm bell would sound in my head. Danger. You are psychologically vulnerable. Your ego is inflated. Stick to the plan. Trust the process. I was, for the first time, becoming my own trading coach. The foundation for my return was finally set. It wasn't built on a new indicator or a secret strategy. It was built on the unshakable bedrock of self-awareness. After 2 months of nothing but intense internal work, I made the decision to return to the arena. But the man who sat down at the desk was not the same one who had quit. The gambler was gone. The ego-driven prodigy was gone. In his place sat a builder, a craftsman. I funded a new account with a very small sum, an amount I was truly, emotionally prepared to lose down to the last penny. I called it my tuition fund. My objective for the next 6 months was not to make money. It was singular and non-negotiable. To prove to myself, under live market conditions, that I could flawlessly follow my new constitution for 100 consecutive trades. The P&L was irrelevant. The only metric that mattered was my discipline score. I began to trade, but it was a form of trading that would have been unrecognizable to my former self. I used the smallest possible position size on every single trade. The profits were laughably small, sometimes just a few dollars. The losses were equally insignificant. I was deliberately stripping the emotional charge out of the act of trading. I wasn't hunting for big wins. I was simply executing my plan, over and over again. I took my valid setups. I skipped the ones that didn't meet my strict criteria. I honored every single stop loss, without hesitation, without a moment of hope. I let my winners run to their predefined targets, without getting greedy and trying to squeeze more out of them. It was by far the most boring trading of my entire life. And it was, without question, the most important. I was no longer seeking thrills. I was forging habits. I was laying down new neural pathways, replacing the old, destructive circuits of impulsiveness and fear with new ones built on patience and process. Every single trade, whether a win or a loss, was a repetition of discipline. I was vaccinating my nervous system against the chaos of the market, and a strange, wonderful thing began to happen. By completely ignoring the results and focusing only on my actions, the results began to take care of themselves. My tiny account started to grow. It wasn't fast. It was a slow, methodical, almost imperceptible upward grind. It was the furthest thing from the get-rich-quick fantasy I once had, and it was infinitely more beautiful. During this period of methodical execution, a deeper intellectual shift was taking place. My old self had operated as a predictor. He believed his job was to guess what was going to happen next. Every trade was a test of his predictive ability, and every loss was a personal failure of foresight. This mindset is a direct path to misery, because it puts you in an unwinnable war against uncertainty. My new self was shedding that skin. I was learning to operate not as a predictor, but as a probability thinker. I began to truly internalize the most fundamental truth of professional trading. You cannot know what will happen next. No one can. The entire game is not about being right. It's about consistently putting the odds in your favor and letting a statistical edge play out over a large number of trades. I stopped seeing the market as a story to be predicted and started seeing it as a casino where I was the house. My job wasn't to guess the outcome of the next spin of the wheel. My job was to own the casino itself, to create a set of rules and a positive expectancy model that, over time, would guarantee profitability, regardless of the random outcome of any single event. This meant I had to know my exact risk on every trade, the statistical probability of my setup working, and the potential reward. When a trade lost, it no longer felt like a personal failure. It was simply the cost of doing business. It was a casino paying out a jackpot on one table, knowing that over the course of the night, across all tables, the house would always win. This intellectual freedom was liberating. It removed the emotional burden of needing to be right and replaced it with the calm, calculated confidence of running a profitable business. As my discipline became second nature and my mindset shifted to probabilities, I was able to cultivate the final and most powerful weapon in a professional trader's arsenal: patience. But I learned that patience is not a passive act. It is not simply waiting. Professional patience is an act of skill. It is a form of discipline. My old self saw a day without a trade as a wasted opportunity. My new self understood that a day spent not trading, because no high probability setup presented itself, was often the most profitable day of all. Sitting on your hands and doing nothing is a trading decision, and it is often the one that saves you the most money. I was cultivating the mindset of a sniper, not a machine gunner. A machine gunner sprays bullets everywhere, hoping to hit something. A sniper can wait for days motionless, in perfect stillness, observing the battlefield, waiting for that single perfect moment where the variables align in his favor. Only then does he squeeze the trigger. I learned to love the boredom. I found a quiet strength in the stillness. I would sit and watch the market's noise and chaos, feeling no compulsion to participate, perfectly content to wait for my edge to appear. This is the final stage of the transformation, when your desire to protect your capital becomes far stronger than your desire to make a quick profit. I had become a warrior in the garden, at peace, but ready. I was no longer hunting the market. I was letting the market come to me. And when it did, I was finally ready. And so we come full circle back to the beginning. The multi-million-dollar account, the financial freedom, the life I live now, it was never the goal. It was the consequence. It was the byproduct of relentless, often painful internal war. The real victory wasn't the number in my bank account. The real victory was the transformation of the man looking at the screen. The market didn't change. I did. I had to descend into the hell of my own undisciplined mind to be reborn. I almost quit moment wasn't a curse. It was the most valuable gift I have ever received. It was a mandatory ego death, an invitation from the universe to stop playing a child's game and to start building a professional's career. It was the painful price of admission to true, lasting success. If you are watching this, and if any part of this story resonates with you, the shaking hand, the hollow feeling in your stomach, the cycle of hope and despair, then please understand, You are not alone. You are simply standing at the same crossroads I once stood at. Your pain is not a sign that you should quit. It is your personal invitation to begin this work. It is a market holding up a mirror and asking you the most important question. Who are you going to become? I want you to make a commitment to yourself right now. In the comments below, type the one word that represents the internal enemy you will finally confront. Is it greed? Is it fear? Is it impulsiveness? Is it ego? Name it. Declare your intention. The act of bringing it from the darkness of your mind into light is the first, most critical step. Your journey to becoming a consistently profitable trader doesn't start with new strategy. It starts with that decision. It starts today.